Hi everyone. I'm Jill Menze, news editor at PhocusWire. And for this session on growth trends and challenges for travel startups, I'm joined here today by Charlotte Franzellin, founder and CEO of Trippers. So Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much for having me, Jill.
Great, great. So I want to start with some background on Trippers and the formation of the company. You know, you actually launched during the pandemic. How did you sort of land on that decision?
I guess the company was founded during the pandemic, but we had been working on it for a while before. So I guess it probably wouldn't have been the first idea that came to mind otherwise. I guess we had been working for about 6 months before the whole COVID situation came about. And I think when you're, a team of very enthusiastic people, you just don't want to give up at the first sign of a problem. So we just knew that one day we'll get back to normal. Nobody really expected it to last this long. Right. And, once you get started and you just work on it, you want to see it come to life. So we just kept going. That's kind of resilience in action there.
Great. And can you give our audience a little bit of background on what does Trippers do? Like what's your business?
Yeah, so Trippers is a travel planning app really focused on weekend getaways in Europe. So really helping groups of people, ideally kind of friends wanting to get together for a weekend somewhere. They don't even necessarily need to know when or where. We kind of really personalize the experience for them to try and identify the best place, the best flights, the best accommodation, all the way to choosing where you're going to be stopping for coffee. So an all-in-one platform through an app on your phone.
Great, great. And so when you did launch during the pandemic, what were your expectations? Obviously, it was a challenging time for every business everywhere, but particularly travel. Can you talk a bit about what your expectations were and how you proceeded when maybe those expectations weren't met?
Sure. So I guess first thing, we were supposed to launch probably 6 months before we actually did. And we obviously just postponed because there was an entire lockdown across Europe. So it made no sense to do a full launch. So I guess what we really learned is it's better to not have any high expectations and just go with kind of taking it more as a beta test, perhaps, and, putting it out there to get feedback from our users to then improve and improve and improve, which I guess has really changed the mindset in the team to going from let's get this amazing product out and become billionaires overnight to, let's just put this product we've been working really hard on out to customers and see what they think of it. So not really a lot of expectations. I think one thing we were hoping to get a bit more of was perhaps feedback from users. I think that's where potentially when you're in the B2C space, it is a lot harder to get. People's attention span is very limited. They get emails day in, day out. So it's very hard to really get those people on a phone call and try to get their attention and understand how their experience was, when perhaps on the B2C model, B2B model, it might be easier. So that's something we learned as we launched, and we're trying to get this feedback, and we're still doing that. So we're very much in a feedback phase, trying to understand where we might have been a little wrong and where we need to pivot or where we need to slightly tweak our current model and our current business to make it work for our users.
Great. Can you elaborate on that feedback a little bit? What did you receive from reaching out? And can you talk a bit about how you reached out? I know, for example, you posted something on LinkedIn asking for feedback. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy there and what you ultimately learned from it?
Sure. So we're still right in the middle of it and always trying to innovate on what to do. But I guess one of the first points of actions was obviously just sending out emails on a not regular basis, but let's say monthly, to try and get all of our new users' feedback as they came through. So we did get a few very useful ones there. We managed to get on some calls with some of our users and did some testing with them live, which was very insightful for us and made us do some tiny little improvements here and there. I think it all comes down to volume, which is still something we're missing. So I guess the problem is with an app that complex like we have, you could go in so many different directions. I think one thing we've learned is that people travel very differently, which I guess we knew. And when your ambition is to try and create one solution that fits everyone, it is a tough job. So, you have one person telling you one thing and then someone else telling you one other thing, but you obviously want to see a critical mass somewhere to go in that direction. You can't please everyone when you're just a team of 3 or 4 people working on it. So that's what we're still working on. We have, I guess, a number of directions which we know are our options, and it's just a matter of knowing, okay, where are our users really wanting us to go to? So we've tried emails, we've tried integrating feedback within the app itself to try and get more response from that. We've tried, personal emails to our users, our most loyal users, to try and get their attention. Yes, as you said, I've also posted on LinkedIn. So once we've tapped those external users, the people that we don't know, we also tapped our connections, all of us in the team, since we all have pretty big networks that don't even come necessarily from the travel space. It's interesting to see from those people that are not in this industry and could be potential users, why or why not they would be interested in the product, or why, how differently they travel from what we thought they would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the complexity of trip planning, which is, notoriously a very hard market to get into because there are so many moving pieces. Did you ever consider perhaps scaling back the scope of what Trippers was trying to do by maybe not making it, every component of the trip, but just maybe narrowing it to flights or accommodations or something like that?
We never really considered that because there are tons of players in that space doing that already. And I think that's not where our unique selling proposition would be. I think where we would really help is in that group aspect, really kind of managing expectations from everyone. And that's what we're trying to do. I think one thing that we have considered, and which we did in the very beginning, but then COVID hit, was maybe scaling back a little bit on the tech and just thinking, okay, let's go back to really doing it manually and seeing how the tech adapts, because we can make the tech work to our advantage. And maybe it's just a question of doing a hybrid model for now and seeing how that can work. Obviously, our main goal and ambition is to do a fully automated planning, which we've managed to do for a very subset of cases. So, you want to do a weekend getaways in Europe. Obviously, we have to start somewhere. Some people, when I say people travel differently, some people might be visiting friends in those cities, so they don't need accommodation. Some other people, we're going to take their car and they're not going to fly. So, and we've tried to adapt to that, but I guess that's obviously our unique selling proposition really comes into that A to Z. So when you only come for Z, then we might be less attracting than other startups or other companies. So no, we've never really considered stepping back on that kind of integrated bundled service, because I think that's where it's, the missing piece is there today. I think it's really just understanding how we can make it more flexible so that it allows for different usage of the app itself based on what you're looking for as a traveler.
Right. Absolutely. I'm going back to LinkedIn now, but you have posted that, entering travel tech and starting Trippers has been the steepest learning curve you have ever been on in your career, which, we've learned a lot of that from startups in this space, but I'm curious if you can elaborate on that a little bit and how travel tech particularly is so different from areas you've worked in before.
I guess for me, it's been the steepest learning curve more on the sense of going into founding your own business, which is obviously always a steep learning curve. I was working in renewable energy consulting before, so it had its own challenges, but I guess something a little bit more stable, and you know what to do, and you know what the expectations are, and you know who your clients are. So when you come to this, you have no idea how to get started. So you read a lot of books and you try to figure it out. And then a pandemic comes and you still have no idea what you're doing. And then you're launching and you still have no idea what you're doing. So it's always challenging yourself. Every day there's a new thing coming up and you have to figure it out. Nobody's there to help you, which obviously before, I had managers and people trying to help me out. Right. Obviously we have mentors for that. So that's very thankful to them. But it still is, and at the end of the day, it's your call. It's you deciding what to do. Travel tech, particularly, I guess for me, was very challenging coming from, being an outsider and never having been in that industry. You come in with your idealistic view of what could be, which was probably an advantage. And I probably wouldn't have been here today, almost 2 years in, if I was from the travel industry space, because I could have seen all the red flags and little things that would have been, potentially wrong with what we were trying to build. But it was also super interesting to be able to learn so much about an industry in, I would say, 1 or 2 months, really just going to conferences and trying to learn. And I guess you never really have this need in life other than when you're trying to build a business and you know nothing about. So I guess for me, it's been a lot of that. Also so much about getting out of my comfort zone. you're meeting all those people that know that you have it's not that you have nothing to do in this industry, but you don't have no experience in the travel industry. So some people might tell you, what are you doing here? Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. And that was also very challenging. It's very good exercise as a startup founder in the beginning to, step back and be proud of yourself and what you're doing and really trust that you can do it.
Yeah, that it serves to sort of make you work harder, because if they're questioning why you're here, what you're doing, well,
Definitely.
you can prove them wrong and continue what you're doing and build a better product.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've also said that, you founded this company, you're CEO, and in that role, you've touched on every area of the business, software, sales, marketing, partnerships, recruitment. That's many jobs all rolled into one. Has that been advantageous or more challenging? And has your level of involvement changed across the entire business over time?
I don't know if it's a question of being advantageous or not. I think all startups have to go through that. You're always starting with 2, 3 people, and then you have to scale it up. So in the beginning, it's always you or someone in your team having to deal with it. I think on a personal level, it's been very advantageous. I've learned, as I said, steepest learning curve on every single front. As an engineer, I never knew what marketing was. So that was definitely something I learned. I think in the beginning, we always wanted to push both sides of the business. Being a B2C company, we never only wanted to do just tech. We also wanted to start looking at the marketing and building a presence, which was very interesting. So when you talk about the involvement, I think when I look back in the beginning, I wouldn't say a lot more focused, but my focus was a lot on the marketing and trying to help building that presence and creating content, which takes a lot of time. So I was really trying to pitch in where I could on that front. And then as we get used to it and as we get better, I got better at delegating and, leaving that front to my CMO, who's been very good at that too. So she's been really taking on the marketing side of things. Then we kind of I really switched on to the product side. Obviously, we don't really have a product owner. We've got my CTO, so really thinking about the technical strategy, but we don't have anyone owning the product. So it was me doing that over these 2 years. And I've really found myself super passionate about that. So that's something I also learned over this adventure. It's been a very interesting ride to try to learn how to build a product in the best way, especially during a pandemic when typically, you want to test and try as much as possible, as soon as possible. And then you get to this point in time where people are willing to test your product, but it makes them depressed because they're stuck in their houses. So they don't want to test your product. So it's been an interesting ride. So, asking anyone you could to test and tell you how to improve instead of getting real users to do it. So that's where my focus has really shifted on the product. Obviously, in the meantime, everything to do with recruitment, that's just a regular day-to-day, still continuing on that. And then now that we've launched, I think the focus, at least my personal focus, has moved a lot more back to marketing and acquisition and trying to find our early adopters and customers. So it's been interesting to go from one to the other and back, but always obviously keeping an eye on everything else.
Right. So it's safe to say you're a little bit busy. So. So you did join us during PhocusWire Europe in July, and you said Trippers would be going for its first funding round this year. How has that process been going?
We made a decision internally to push it back a little because we could afford to do that. I think our goal was to really have a plan of action as to what the next steps are for Trippers. And as we launched, and as I said, we were trying to gather the feedback, we didn't have a clear one. As I said, we have many different options of where to go to, and they're all quite different. So I don't think that would be enough to go to an investor and say, okay, we have all of these options, but we're still trying to figure out which one. So I think we really want to be confident when we go to them and say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing over this period of time. It's going to be ready then, and these are going to be the results, which is obviously what investors typically expect. Mm-hmm. So that's why we've decided to push it back a little, try to gather this intelligence, and really try to make something useful out of it and create a proper plan of action.
Perfect. Great. Well, we will be following your journey. And unfortunately, we're at time, though. But Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's been great. Yes, thank you.